Welcome to Roll for Crit. I am here to talk to you about another brand new expansion for the Marvel Legendary deck building card game, and that is Messiah Complex. This is one of their slightly bigger deluxe expansions, so it comes with 8 heroes, 3 masterminds, plus some extra stuff that I'll go over. This one is X-Men centric, or I should say also X-Force and X-Factor investigations. You have a few different branches of the X-Men, and this is kind of a pseudo sequel in some ways to the Dark City expansion. There's some carryover from that in terms of the plot line. There's also, of course, new keywords and some returning keywords. There's a lot to cover in this one, so I'm going to try to cover the broad strokes right now just to get you used to the idea of what you can expect to find in this set and then give you my thoughts. So, of course, there are some big new keywords, and some of them have some big effects on the game. The first one that I will talk about is clone, and I'll show you a few different heroes that make use of this, but you can find this on all kinds of cards, heroes, and villains throughout the set. And essentially, if something says to clone it, now sometimes it could be when you recruit that card, so you get to do it right away. Sometimes you might need a specific other symbol in order to do that when you recruit it. Some of them will allow you to do it even after you've played them, you have them in your deck and you're playing them on your turn if you have the appropriate symbol. And what it means is that you look through the HQ, the hero lineup, or the entire deck of hero cards and find the other copy of that card. So as soon as you get one, in some cases, you'll get another, or like in this case, this multiple man card, once you play one with a tech card in front of it, you get to then look through the deck and add another one to your deck, goes in your discard pile. So this is a way for you to really build up quickly. Now, usually these clone cards are lower cost cards that aren't quite as powerful, so it's not like you're gonna really ramp up so much, but that doesn't mean it's not good. Your deck, if there's a lot of cloning heroes at play, it's going to get bigger faster, and you're going to not have to worry as much potentially about some of those lesser cards because you're going to be filling it with more of these. And as I said, there's a few different ways that the cloning can come up, but a lot of them are just when you recruit them. Now, this does mean that every time you do that, you're going to have to shuffle the deck because, of course, if you had to look through it, then you can't know the exact order of it. You've got to reshuffle it each time. So that can slow down the game. Especially if you're just playing with, 2 players maybe, or even a solo game, there can be a lot more downtime. You have to wait for somebody to finish reshuffling the whole deck. So that is something to take into account, but it can make you really powerful really fast. Even some of their big rare cards that are usually just one, they have actually duplicates of those as well. So there's all kinds of ways to clone. And like I said, some of those villains have clone abilities as well. For instance, here you have Mr. Sinister clones. And as soon as a Mr. Sinister enters the city from the villain deck, you look through the villain deck and you get another Mr. Sinister. So they can overrun the city super fast. Some of them have slight variations that determine whether they get cloned or not. They may even allow you, if you fight them, to clone another card you recruit on that turn. So that's interesting because even if you're playing with these villains but not with any of these heroes, you might be able to clone heroes from other sets that normally wouldn't have a clone ability. So this is a whole new layer to the game and allows you to get new cards. Of course, if you're playing with other people and they've already taken all the copies of that card, then the clone ability has no effect. But that's the first big keyword. The other one that I want to talk about is shatter. Shattering means that you take a look at a villain and you have their life total. I believe it is rounding up. And some cards will allow you to do that to the mastermind, usually just the really good cards. A lot of cards will allow you to do it to a villain. And of course, it makes them twice as easy to defeat. You'll need half the attack power you normally would. You can also shatter hero cards in the HQ, and if you do that, that cuts their cost in half. So some cards will allow you to buy things more easily. Some villains will have inherent abilities right in their text that says you can maybe spend a recruit point to shatter this villain multiple times. For instance, here you have a new mastermind called Exodus who has 32 health to start. However, you can pay 3 recruit points points any number of times to shatter him. So it really means you need a certain amount of attack depending on how many recruit points you're able to get to bring that number down. So just a little different sort of way for you to try to get around certain enemies, and it allows them to make new villains that have really high health totals that seem very scary when they come out, very intimidating, but there's a new method to try to take them on, and there's different ways that the different villains play around with that. The other big new keyword is tactical formation. And this one looks at heroes' costs and rewards you for having played heroes of certain costs. For example, here is M, who has a lot of these types of abilities. And this one says tactical formation 333. What that means is if you have in your hand or have played 3 cards with a cost of 3, you get to trigger that ability. Some of them are not that aligned like that with all 3s. There might be a 2-2-5 or just a 2-2 or maybe a 3-4-5. All kinds of different combinations, and usually within the deck of that specific hero, they're going to have cards that suit those costs. So if you are building around that character, you will get the benefits of that ability. They'll also often bring back the investigate keyword, which you'll see on a bunch of cards in this set. For instance, here, this allows her to investigate for a card that costs 3. It means you look at the top 2 cards of your deck. If you have a 3 cost, you get to draw it. So they'll have ways to allow you to make that happen. Finally, there's another big new mechanic here called Prey, P-R-E-Y. If a villain has the keyword Prey, that means that when it comes out, it will prey on a specific player. And it will have certain conditions. For example, it might say, whichever player has the least of a certain symbol in hand. And everybody has to reveal and show what they have. Maybe I have the fewest strength heroes or something like that. And if that's you, that villain goes in front of you. And if it is still there at the end of your turn, there will be a negative effect that you have to deal with. Now, all other players can attack that villain still, just like any other villain that would be in the city normally. But this does create some tension maybe between players depending on what your goals are, because you might be asking other players to try to help you to take that villain out before it's too late. Or maybe it's your turn and that villain comes out, and because it will affect you at the end of your current turn, you have no choice. You have to go after that villain when maybe you would have preferred to try to take out the mastermind or something else because you don't want that bad effect to happen to you. So it's just one way for the villains to kind of have a little bit more of a personalized touch to them and make you worry about them in a different way, but they are essentially attacked and defeated just like any others. Of course, there are some new annoying ones that maybe will go back in the deck if that happens. Maybe they'll even clone themselves and might prey again. All kinds of things like that. There's even a mastermind in this set that also preys on people, Lady Deathstrike. If she ends up preying on you, you're going to have to take bad effects. For instance, discarding cards, gaining wounds. So that's an interesting little twist. It's not just villains, it's also the big ones. There's another mastermind over here, the last one that I didn't show off. This is Bastion, the Fused Sentinel. And I just think he's pretty interesting because all of his different tactics cards are unique, and they all create their own separate masterminds. So he doesn't really do too much with the new keywords, but he is just an interesting one to throw into the mix that has some unique challenges to present to you. So they also brought back the Chivalrous Duel keyword. It's another one you might remember just in this one villain group over here, Clan Yashida, which means you have to take them on with all of one specific hero type. You can't mix and match in order to fight them. But those are really the big keywords in this one. It's really about cloning is the biggest, then shattering and tactical formation. And there's a decent amount of investigate thrown in there as well. And I actually like that a lot, both investigate and tactical formation. For example, I'll show you a couple more heroes here, Warpath and Siren. And I think what makes them viable with those keywords is they're really good sort of support types, heroes that I think could fit well into a lot of other groups or complement certain other heroes because, for instance, here, Warpath, this card lets you choose a number 1 or more and investigate for a card of that cost from your deck. So whatever your deck build is, there's a certain number or card you're looking for that could potentially be useful. And any of the cards with tactical formation, that have different numbers on them, for instance, 2, 4, 6, it doesn't necessarily have to be Siren's cards. You could still build up 2s, 4s, and 6 cost heroes from other groups, and she can still potentially help them go off. So I think that's a nice little addition to the game. And finally, I'll show off Strong Guy, because he's my favorite named hero in this set. And he also makes use of a bunch of these different keywords and has some funny art and abilities. And most of them don't just focus on one of these. There's a lot spread around between cloning and shattering and definitely investigating and tactical formation, especially because I think investigate and tactical formation both kind of can complement any other major abilities that a hero has. Now, there's not just these new heroes and villains. I know that's a lot already, but this one also adds one other, I think, pretty significant thing, which is new sidekick cards for the sidekick deck. This is the generic deck of sidekicks that came out, I think, in the Civil War expansion that you could choose to buy from on your turn. Now there are another set of them alongside the Pet Avengers, which were also in one of them. Maybe that was Civil War, Secret Wars. I can't keep track of all the wars. These you can shuffle right in so that you may draw these when you're taking a sidekick. And some of them use some of the keywords. Again, they'll bring in like shatter or investigate. I think Boom Boom is kind of interesting because Boom Boom has different choices of how you can use her. You get to decide which of those abilities you want. And depending on which one you choose, she might get to come back in your deck. Or for a really powerful one, you might have to take a wound. And they all have, of course, different individual classes, so you might be able to use them to trigger other cards in your set. These are not all of the new sidekicks. This is just all the unique ones. There are duplicates of them that will go into your deck. And I think that's cool because potentially if you wanted to now, you could remove the original generic sidekicks, mix these with the pets and have only these unique ones in your sidekick deck, or you just mix them all together like they recommend, and you might end up with one of the original ones, or you get one of these special ones. I always like stuff like that. I love when they added new shield agents to the game. Anything that adds more variety for that type of card, makes them more powerful, more interesting, is worthwhile. And of course, there are a few bystanders that you can mix into the deck that are new, as well as new schemes. You thought that we were done, but in fact, these schemes actually have another weird new mechanic that you can contend with, veiled schemes. Essentially, the way these work is on one side, it says veiled scheme, and on the other side, it says unveiled scheme. And at the start of the game scenario, you go through whichever one you've picked. It'll tell you, a certain number of twists come out. But after so many twists come out, you then are meant to shuffle all of your schemes that have unveiled sides and randomly choose one of them to become the second half of the scheme. So you don't necessarily know what they are gathering twists for. So this is kind of a cool idea. It keeps you on your toes a little bit. Some of these schemes, I think, are particularly involved and kind of convoluted. I think we're getting to the point in Legendary where there's like 200 of these schemes and they have to keep making them more and more complex, and there's more decks going on. So I wasn't really in love with any of these that much, but the idea of the veiled scheme, and maybe if they added more unveiled later on, especially if you're someone who's played Legendary a million times, this could add some more variety to the game for you. So overall, I think this is a really good expansion. The biggest factor for me that's sort of a downside is the fact that the cloning really can potentially add a lot of downtime to the game because you have to shuffle the decks so many times. Now, a lot of times, for instance, some of the villains will say after you defeat them, they might go back on the bottom of the villain deck or something like that. So sometimes you can get lucky and you can just know, oh, that villain's in the bottom of the deck, so I don't have to reshuffle. I can just take it off and I don't need to look at any of the other cards. So that is nice. There are things like that, so they try to alleviate that for you, but it's definitely going to happen more. But on the flip side, that cloning ability, I think, is really unique and cool, and it's just interesting to get your deck potentially built up really fast, especially like if you're playing just with the Messiah Complex set. A bunch of those clones come out. Your deck can be much bigger, much faster than it usually would be in a game. And of course, like a lot of these recent sets, I think the villains are tougher. They have more challenging scenarios. So if you like a challenge, it's going to add more to that. And for the sidekicks alone, for me, that makes this one almost an essential purchase. Another thing to note, of course, is that I don't think this set is going to have any of your fan favorites in it, unless you're a real deep cut X-Men lore fan. But it is kind of cool that they're kind of following up to Dark City, which is one of my favorite expansions. So I think some of these cards would mix well. Certainly thematically, they mix well, because they even mention in the rules that some of those characters cross over as part of this storyline. And that's sort of the thing of this set, is in some ways, it's very referential to older Legendary sets, of course, with keywords returning, but the way that it seems to mix and integrate well with past sets. It's a nice one to have if you already have a lot of expansions to mix up the variety of it. And I think I do overall like it a little more than the last expansion before this, which was the new Fantastic Four set, Annihilation. But of course, it's hard to not prefer one that is twice as big. It comes with a lot more heroes and new villains and new henchman cards, which aren't always included in all of the expansion sets. So that is Messiah Complex. Overall, I enjoyed it. It's available right now for Marvel Legendary, and they're not slowing down with these. There's more coming throughout the year, but I'd like to hear from you. What do you think about this expansion? Is there a particular hero group that is your personal favorite in this one that you really like, whether it be by themselves or mixed with some other ones from another set? I know, for instance, there's like Warpath here, has a bunch of 2-cost cards, and there's some cards that give you tactical formation for 2 costs, which means if you're playing with Spider-Man characters, they're going to get along well. Any combinations like that you found, talk to me in the comments below. I'd be interested to hear it. But that is my review of this one. I do recommend it if you're a Legendary fan. I think at this point, if you're this deep into Legendary, you're probably going to buy this no matter what, but it gets my recommendation. My name is Jonathan, and this has been Roll for Crit. Do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to our channel, or if you really like us, you can support us on Patreon. Become a high roller today for exclusive bonus content. We also have a podcast now. You can check that out at rollforcrit.com/podcast. Weekly episodes with special guests you definitely want to listen to.